My name is Oliver Queen. To my family, I'm the brother and son who just returned home after being lost at sea 5 years ago. They don't know I came back with a mission to bring justice to our city.
Thank you all for making the trip down here. I know everyone appreciates it. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to all you guys. First off, I got to start with Greg, because I know you're a huge fan of all the comic books. Why out of everybody, because really you could do anyone you want, why out of everybody did you choose Green Arrow?
Well, first thing I'll say before I answer is just how wonderful this moment is to thank everybody that's came out. Really, you work so hard on these things, and everybody kills themselves. But we're just, you know, in TV, you just don't get to always meet the people that love the show or the audience. And so we're so grateful just for everyone's commitment to the show and for everybody that's sort of spread the word. So thank you for that.
Yeah, this is kind of like an upscale Comic-Con.
Yeah. We picked Arrow. Arrow was always, to me, it seemed like ripe for a TV show, in part because he's a crusader for social justice, which you kind of knew in the DNA of the show. It felt like, well, there's many episodes of a TV series there. And then I would say the other thing that was appealing to us was, you know, was always exciting and interesting, was just the possibility of doing an origin story. In a movie, you do an origin story, and it's the first 20 minutes of the film. But on a series, you can do an origin. In this instance, you know, for us, it's The Island. You get to tell that over multiple years, and so much of the DNA of who that character was and the origin of that character and his development on that island just seemed ripe for storytelling. And then there was also, I think, the ability that he was really of our world, you know, and that he was one of us. And so there was that element of it. I think the second half of it, just the desire to, you know, for all of us that were involved at the outset, was our experience and Mark's experience along with us working together before and wanting to work together again. And then our experience working with Mark and I both, and Andrew, all came over from ABC, where we had worked with Mark Pedowitz, who was at CW now at the time. So it was really one of those great kind of things of we all really wanted to work together and bring a character to life, and this just seemed like, he just sort of seemed like the right one. And then the final thing I'll sort of say about it is you have all those ideas and you have all those notions, but truthfully, until you have you know, the director of the pilot and your cast, you don't know if you just have scripts on pages of a script, and you don't know that you have a TV show. And we were so fortunate, from Stephen through everyone that we were able to get here, and David Nutter, and everything that everybody brought to really bringing it all to life. Was for us, that's you know, as much as you like to think you kind of create the show before that happens, that's really when the show's created. And so that was incredible.
Can you talk a little bit? I was there that day that Stephen walked in. Can you talk about that casting process? Because I remember the script was fantastic, but everybody talked about who is he.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had it actually happen that quickly on a show. You know, everybody ran down to my office. I said, okay, you know, I had other things I had to go do, and I said to Andrew and Mark, if you guys, and to you, if you see someone you like, just come knock. And I like literally walked 10 feet away, and it was like 2 minutes later, and you guys are knocking on my door, and I'm like, I think you're a little eager. But I'll go in and I'll see whoever. And we walked in, and Stephen was brilliant. And you know, the thing that there were 2 or 3 scenes he had to do, and he obviously, you know, you're looking for a couple things. You're looking for a great actor that you know can do all the emotion and all the heart and still the damage of this character, and you know that you're also going to have a character he's playing a completely different character on the island. Can he do both those levels? And then in addition to that, how much of the DNA of the original character does he sort of, you know, do you feel like you're really sort of seeing Oliver Queen when you're sort of around him? And we all kind of had that collective feeling.
So Mark and Andrew, I know you guys are big fans as well. Can you talk a little bit about what comic books you guys drew from, and also what film and television that all you and Greg and everybody else drew from? Because I know that you were inspired by a lot of different things.
Well, we clearly were very, influenced by the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. He really took it, what had previously been a very fantastical world and, brought it down to earth and made it feel very grounded and realistic. And that was always sort of our touchstone for the character. And in addition to the Dark Knight, there was also just this sort of, in a way, this brothers and sisters, which is, a show Greg developed, with the family stuff and, and shows like Revenge with the, ongoing family saga. It really was this sort of like, perfect sense of alchemy that, everything came together that, as Greg said, we weren't quite sure was going to work. And yet, finding the cast that we did and, and refining the script and, every episode has a little bit of these elements and, and I don't know why they don't all clank together, but somehow it all sort of like works as one.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the comic book influences, I think the first two sort of series that we looked at were Mike Grell's The Longbow Hunters, which is this series that Mike Grell wrote and drew back in the 80s that basically sort of reinvented Oliver Queen, Green Arrow for a modern day, quote-unquote modern day audience, a post-Silver Age audience. And it was a very grounded, very realistic take. He didn't even go by the name Green Arrow, much like in our show. And the second was Andy Diggle's, yeah, that's a coincidence, folks. Andy Diggle and Jock's 6-issue Green Arrow Year 1 miniseries, which it takes place, as the title implies, over the course of 1 year, but it's on the island. And that, for us, was proof of concept that you could tell an extended story with a cool beginning, middle, and end, and interesting plot twists, all set on the island, which obviously was a big, component of Greg's original conception for the show.
It was also the first time in that book. It was every previous iteration of his time on the island, he was alone. It was basically just castaway. He just, felt bad and got thin and learned to fish. And, that comic book was really...
I love that issue.
Yeah. That book was the first time anybody had suggested that he'd had adventures on the island, that he actually became the Green Arrow on the island. And that was really, such a massive touchstone because, obviously in the course of the pilot, it was just about getting Oliver to the island. But, if we were blessed enough to get to go to series, we always knew that we were going to, populate the island with this cast of characters and, and put Oliver through, this incredible crucible, that would, explain why when we saw him at the beginning of the pilot, he came back this very cold, damaged, but lethal character.
Speaking of comic books too, the amount of action in the show is crazy. I think Steven is doing most of it himself, it's which I find unbelievable, but how do you get it done?
So, JJ is our stunt coordinator, and our fight choreographer's name is Bam Bam. James Bamford, and they get the script, and the stage direction is there, and whether it's a parkouring sequence or whether it's a fight sequence, they map it out. If it's a chase sequence, they actually map out the chase sequence with like little toy mini cars. And then Simon, my stunt double, and John Kralt, who's sort of our stuntman extraordinaire, if someone falls down the stairs or falls from a high object, it's John. And they shoot videos that they deliver to you guys. And then I do some rehearsal, and away we go.
So you're halfway through this, well, we're more than halfway through the season now. What do you love playing about Oliver Queen? What do you love about the character?
I mean, I've become a big sucker for the island. I love the island stuff. And, because when we began on the island, I was just laying around in the cave like an idiot.
We wrote that, right?
I know, but I mean, but I always knew that eventually, at a certain point, my spine would begin to form, so to speak. And, I think that we saw that in episode 14 when we actually took some time, the Odyssey, and we spent more time on the island than we did in the present day for that episode. And it was just really, really fun for me to all of a sudden just start to see these little shifts in the character.
Well, with him revealing, like, obviously, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the episode a couple weeks ago, but
That Jeff wrote.
yeah, that I wrote, but you revealed yourself to Tommy, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously that's going to be very different reaction than revealing yourself to Diggle or Felicity. How is that going to play out? Can you give us a little hint of what's up next for Oliver?
Well, it changes everything about their friendship. I mean, aside from him being the vigilante, Tommy's big problem is that whether or not I'm doing something virtuous or not, I kill people. You know, he saw me in the pilot, and I confirmed it to him. Kill 3 guys, and that's not. I mean, Tommy Collins' character, he's a good guy. I mean, he doesn't want to see that. He doesn't want to have to reconcile that his friend will do that. And for me, it's terrible because I told Diggle by design, and I told Felicity by design. I did not tell Tommy by design. And my buffer to my family and to Laurel is now way too thin for my comfort level. If he could just roll over in bed and say, "Hey, Oliver's the vigilante." And I didn't want that.
Well said.
What's also interesting is that Tommy's the first person to find out who knew the old Oliver. You know, for us as writers, you know, Dig and Felicity are people that Oliver's met, you know, since he came back from the island. But Tommy's the first person who knew Oliver essentially his entire life, and his entire, you know, everyone else who's found out has sort of joined the crusade. And Tommy finding out, it's the first person whose entire worldview of who Oliver Queen is really blown out of the water. And watching that conflict between them is going to fuel the rest of the season.
You didn't mention Diggle, John Diggle. I think he's an amazing addition to the Green Arrow mythos. So, David, do you feel you have more freedom because there isn't a comic book version? There is not added pressure of, hey, this character has to be this specific way.
Yeah, I do feel some type of leeway to that. You know, listen, every time I look at a script, I just look for the back to see if I die. Like, yo, my brother's dead, so I'm good. But, I mean, no, but yeah, I do, listen, there's no canon, there's no DC canon for John Diggle, so that's great. But, you know, when I did meet Andrew and David Nutter, you know, when I went in for the role, they had such a clear vision of who Diggle was and where he was going, how he would find out. They knew that it was going to be either the 3rd or 4th episode that he would find out. I mean, they had a very clear-cut life for John Diggle. So it's great that though he doesn't necessarily have a future that's in stone like maybe a DC universe, I'm in excellent hands. I trust Andrew and Mark not to kill me. Besides that, I love what they're doing. I love what they're doing with Diggle.
So you guys want him to live? Well, there you go.
Well,
first round's on me.
So speaking of death and returns, one of the things, Greg, you pushed really hard for in the episode I wrote at the end is the very end, again, spoilers, hopefully you guys have seen it, but Laurel's mother returns and says, "I think Sarah's alive." Mm-hmm. And there was some debate about whether that line was even going to be in that episode, and you really were the one that, I think, expertly, ingeniously put that in there.
Right.
So what was the motivation behind laying that huge...
I would say from the, you know, hopefully when we're all doing our jobs right, it's a lot of this stuff is set up even in the pilot, you know, and Sarah and who she is and what she means to the Lance family and what she means to Oliver's past, and you know, all of that is stuff that we've really wanted to get to at some point in this year. And we knew at the end of your episode that we were heading into the sort of a lot of times we sort of see the whole season as a whole, almost like 3 acts of a film. And the winter episodes are in a lot of ways the second act, and the final run of episodes should feel like almost like the third act. And that was just something, if we hadn't sort of planted our flag in the ground on that and certain other storylines, by the time you go in, the audience, wants to pay attention to the other storylines that have been set up. And so that was something that we definitely wanted to get back to and evolve the characters, in part because of the lore of what that means of who we would bring in. And then also for the beginning of some things that we have planned throughout the rest of the year.
What are you doing here?
It's about Sarah.
What about her?
I think she may be alive.
And I thought, Katie, you did that beautifully, and that scene was wonderful.
Thank you.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about where that's going to take Laurel, what she has to deal with, what the fallout of that visit from her estranged mother will bring?
Yes, as if Laurel doesn't have it hard enough. I feel like the poor girl has gone through a lot. Her mom obviously shows back up and says this, and I think, the first initial reaction was the same reaction that I had, is I couldn't quite figure out how to wrap my head around this as a character and thinking about Laurel and everything she's gone through, to hear, first off, her mother show up, and then her mother obviously deliver some information. I think my initial reaction to it was very sincere, of just like complete shock, and then I think, Laurel being a lawyer, she has a reaction to things, but then she will, she starts to sort of get into it and rationalize and think, whether, is she telling the truth, or does she have the correct information, and how, and she kind of gets sucked in, I think, by her mother a bit. But you'll definitely get a chance to see her mother kind of challenge her father and the dynamic within the family. It's really fun to have these scenes with, obviously, Alex. She's amazing, and yeah, she's fantastic. And Paul is fantastic, and working with them and sort of exploring that family dynamic has been awesome.
Yeah, the family dynamics in this show throughout, you guys have created wonderful characters. And Suzanne, one of my favorite characters, I really, really love her, and then I'm very, very afraid of her. So, I need to know, is she a good guy or a bad guy?
I have something that I wrote down that I keep with me. Moira Queen, mother of mystery. And I think that I just wait for the next script to come out to give me more information. I've created a backstory for her, but the pilot caught me off guard. It was as much a shock to me, the ending on the pilot. And now what we're exploring through this first season is really interesting to me. Her relationship with Walter, and this dynamic, hard relationship with Malcolm, and her parenting.
There are other ways of finding out what my son knows.
Yeah, the parenting is very unique.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is.
Her son.
Yes.
And why didn't she know that was her son standing? Because she's had lots of help parenting them, right? She's a billionaire.
Can you talk a little bit about where she's going to go now? That, last we saw, her attempted hit on Malcolm Merlyn failed, and now she's been tasked with finding out from Malcolm who put the hit on his head.
I think she's once again being put between a rock and a hard place, and she's making another deal with this particular devil that she's been making deals with along the way, hoping against all hope for the ultimate not to happen. And she makes these little bargains with herself, and it's all for her family.
I think that's the key. I mean, for us as writers too, we talk about this a lot, whatever Moira does, she does to keep her family safe. And, sometimes that means trying to knock off Malcolm, sometimes that means torturing her son to make sure that he doesn't know information that could ultimately get him killed. So
But torture kidnapping her son so that someone else doesn't kidnap him.
Yeah, no, she had somebody else.
Justified.
Yeah. But in our heads, that's what keeps her, that's her morality, and her love for her family. And that's what's great about, the character and the way Susanna portrays her, because, she's, just, in one episode, she's completely loving and there for them. And then the next episode, she's, plotting to have somebody killed. But it's all coming from the same place. And I think that.
A loving mother.
I wasn't a comic book reader when I joined this. And I just look at it as classical, literature.
Yeah.
These type of big stories, big moments, big conflicting circumstances. And it's fun to play, and it's wonderful to work with these actors.
We have a traitor in our midst. I want you to find out who. He just made his last mistake.
So speaking of questionable parents, the Dark Archer. So the Dark Archer, is Oliver gonna regret saving his life? Is this gonna change?
Yeah.
Is this gonna change?
Yeah.
Can you guys give us a little hint at how Malcolm's gonna change or potentially change his viewpoint on who this vigilante is and what his role is?
I think what's interesting about Malcolm, and you've heard a little bit about it, and it's going to be explored further, is that he lost his wife, and for us, in a way, Malcolm is sort of evil Bruce Wayne. We talk a lot about Batman Begins, that moment in the movie where Bruce goes through the training with Ra's al Ghul, and then he's told to execute a criminal. In our minds. In the movie, Bruce doesn't do it. In our minds, Malcolm did. And, I think, that was really important to us, and Greg, really, forced us to, to really think about it in terms of like, the villain has to have sympathy. Everyone's the hero of their own story. And, what's really interesting about, Malcolm versus Oliver is they both want the same thing in an odd way. They both want what's best for the city. They both want to clean up the city. I think Malcolm would say that Oliver's going about it very slowly.
He's got to get 100 episodes out.
Yeah.
So in his defense.
But we have great stuff coming up where you're really going to find out a lot more about Malcolm and what's driving him, and obviously what the undertaking is, the very scary sounding undertaking.
He's the hero of his own story, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of villains, because I love villains, you guys set up Deathstroke early on. There's a great dynamic going on the island now. There, obviously, something happened because he's got his mask with an arrow through it.
Yeah, but first I have to say, David Nutter, when we were doing the pilot, said, guys, we need one more secret on the island. We need one more mystery. There's not enough. We need something. And we were sitting around talking about it, and we're like, I don't know, maybe there's like a totem pole or something. And it was Jeff Johns who said, Deathstroke's mask sitting somewhere. So, and it's funny because it was a small little moment that it worked for us in so many ways, because for one thing, it told the comic book fans, I think, right away that first we weren't screwing around, and but then also it's provided Deathstroke, the character, being part of the show, played by Manu Bennett. So that's all due to Jeff Johns.
What can you tell us a little bit about that relationship, because it's become like the heart of the island now. It's a wonderful relationship. I mean, I think seeing Steven trying to do one of those pull-ups was hysterical. But those two together, it's a really great dynamic. Is that going to be a big part of the show going forward?
Well, that's our hope. A lot of that's going to depend upon Manu and his availability and whatnot. But we love him, and we love writing Oliver and Slade together. I mean, they are sort of like a proto Butch and Sundance on the island, and that's a huge source of fun for us. But then soon we'll be complicating that relationship in future episodes. Not necessarily drawing tension to it, but adding an unexpected third element to it.
One of the new additions to the show, and she's a series regular next season, is Felicity Smoke.
Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about, I mean, this is a minor supporting cast member from the Fury of Firestorm comic book. It has nothing to do with it. This is great, but it's so.
Showing my roots.
How did she go from that to a regular in the Green Arrow show?
Well, you know,
And are you guys surprised by, because she's blown up, obviously people really
She's
respond to her.
awesome.
She's
we're
great.
less surprised than gratified, I think. Like,
It's really all because of Emily. I mean,
Yeah.
truthfully, we wrote that as a, we never intended to like, oh, hey, we're introducing this new recurring character who one day is going to find out Oliver Queen's secret. It was, Oliver needed to go to an IT girl, and we decided to make it somebody in Queen Consolidated, and we gave her a little bit of edge, which we thought was fun. And Mark and I saw like the casting people. They send you the videos of the readings of the people who come in to read, and she was clearly the best one, and we did it once, and we're what's going to happen, and we were watching, sometimes we'll watch the show like with Twitter.
and by sometimes we
mean every Wednesday night. And that first episode that she was on, like all of a sudden it was like, hey, who's the blonde IT girl? Who's the blonde IT girl? And and then we were getting feedback from Peter Roth, who's the president of Warner Brothers, called us and said, I love the blonde computer girl. And and that first scene, with her, like really became proof of concept for what she could be, because Stephen was so funny in that scene, with that first scene with her.
I don't think that my character had cracked a smile.
Yeah.
Before episode 3 when I saw her, and we were shooting that. I remember calling you guys afterwards. I just remember saying, Emily was really great, and that was a really fun scene to shoot.
Yeah.
I'm legitimately laughing at her as she's bumbling away, and I'm so happy. It's we have it was getting lonely in the foundry with
It was. It was. I mean, how many sit-ups can I watch this dude do?
Well, guys, thanks so much for coming out. Thanks for watching the show.